Over 2,300 years ago, a young man from a small kingdom in northern Greece set out to change the world. His name was Alexander, and by the time of his death, he had carved out one of the largest empires in history. This is the story of Alexander the Great, the man, the myth, and the conqueror. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the capital of the Kingdom of Macedon. His father, King Philip II, was a brilliant military leader who had united most of Greece under Macedonian rule. His mother, Olympias, was deeply religious and fiercely ambitious. From an early age, Alexander was destined for greatness. As a boy, Alexander was tutored by none other than the great philosopher Aristotle, who taught him subjects ranging from philosophy to science. But Aristotle also instilled in Alexander a love for Homer's epic, the Iliad, which inspired him to emulate the heroism of Achilles. Alexander's rise to power began with tragedy. In 336 BCE, King Philip II was assassinated, and at just 20 years old, Alexander became king. His ascension was not without challenge. He faced internal rebellion and threats from surrounding territories. But Alexander swiftly crushed his enemies, consolidating his power over Greece. Once his position was secure, Alexander set his sights on a greater prize, the Persian Empire. This vast empire had long been the dominant power in the ancient world. Alexander saw an opportunity to avenge Greece's earlier defeats and prove himself as the new master of the world. In 334 BCE, Alexander led his army of 40,000 soldiers across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, beginning what would become one of the greatest military campaigns in history. His first major battle was at the Granicus River, where he decisively defeated the Persian forces. The real test came in 333 BCE at the Battle of Issus, where Alexander faced the Persian king Darius III. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance and fearless leadership led to a stunning victory. Darius fled the battlefield, and the Persian heartland lay open to Alexander. Part 4. The Siege of Tyre and the Conquest of Egypt. One of Alexander's most famous campaigns was the Siege of Tyre. The island city of Tyre, heavily fortified and surrounded by water, was considered impregnable. But Alexander was determined. He built a causeway from the mainland to the island, allowing his forces to breach the city walls. After a 7-month siege, Tyre fell, demonstrating Alexander's relentless will. After Tyre, Alexander marched into Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. In 332 BCE, he founded the city of Alexandria, which would become one of the most important cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. Part 5. The Battle of Gaugamela and the Fall of Persia. By 331 BCE, Alexander faced his greatest challenge yet, the Battle of Gaugamela. Darius III assembled a massive army, far larger than Alexander's, but Alexander, with his superior tactics, once again triumphed. Darius fled the battlefield, only to be later assassinated by his own men. With the fall of Persia, Alexander was now the ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen. After his victory, Alexander marched into the Persian capital of Persepolis. In a symbolic act, he burned the great city, avenging the Persian invasion of Greece a century earlier. Alexander was now proclaimed the King of Asia. Part 6. The Campaign in India. Never satisfied, Alexander pushed eastward into the unknown lands of India. His army faced new challenges, unfamiliar terrain, monsoons, and war elephants. In 326 BCE, he fought the Battle of the Hydaspes against King Porus, a local ruler. The battle was hard fought, but Alexander's forces emerged victorious. However, after years of constant campaigning, Alexander's soldiers were weary. When they reached the Hyphasis River, they mutinied, refusing to go any further. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back, his dreams of conquering India unfulfilled. Part 7. Death and Legacy. In 323 BCE, Alexander returned to Babylon, where he planned new campaigns to the west. But before he could embark on these new adventures, tragedy struck. After a sudden illness, Alexander the Great died at just 32 years old. After his death, Alexander's empire was divided among his generals, known as the Diadochi. Though his empire did not last, Alexander's legacy endured. He spread Greek culture and ideas across 3 continents, blending it with local traditions to create a new era of Hellenistic civilization. Part 8. The legend of Alexander. Over the centuries, Alexander's story has become legend. Historians debate his true motivations. Was he a ruthless conqueror or a visionary leader who sought to unite the world? What is clear is that Alexander left an indelible mark on history, shaping the course of civilizations for millennia. Alexander the Great remains one of the most celebrated figures in history. His conquests redefined the ancient world and laid the foundations for future empires. Though his life was short, his influence is eternal. I would rather live a short life of glory than a long one of obscurity. Alexander the Great.